Recently, I did a video in which I talked about the experimental double-decker trains that were tried out on British railways from 1949 through to 1971. But even more recently, I learned something new about these trains, which I not only didn't know when I made my original video, but I've not seen discussed in any history of these particular trains. But it's something that I think is a very important, indeed vital, part of their story. And indirectly, it affects the railways of London to this very day. You see, when I talked about these double-decker trains, I didn't know why they were built. I had a rough idea, but nothing more than that. But recently, a document has come into my possession that gives me that context. Join me as we uncover the secrets of the Double Ds. Stop laughing. What are you laughing at? I'll put a link to the previous video in the description below. But, to briefly recap, the 4DDs were 4-coach electric trains designed by Oliver Bulleid of the Southern Railway. Bulleid loved to play with concepts that were too radical for most railway engineers, admittedly with mixed success. The 4DDs were Britain's first and only double-decker trains. Well, unless you count the ones on the Swansea and Mumbles, but I think those are more trams than trains. Sorry, I'm digressing. Now, many rail fans argue that the 4DDs are not true double-deckers. Rather, the two decks overlap, with the lower part of the upper deck compartments protruding into the lower deck compartments. That's because Britain has an unusually low loading gauge. To put it simply, true double-decker trains wouldn't fit under the many tunnels and bridges of the southern region of British railways, so these were a compromise. As part of the compromise, they lacked many of the features typical of commuter trains. The upper decks were pressure ventilated with non-opening windows, and there were no grab handles or footboards on the outside. 2 trains of 4 coaches each were built and put to work on the crowded line from Charing Cross to Dartford. They were not a success. They worked fine, but passengers didn't like them. The pressure ventilation made them uncomfortable in hot weather, the compartments were cramped, and passengers often preferred to stand downstairs than sit upstairs, even in rush hour. They took longer to load and unload than conventional rolling stock. The trains continued in service until 1971, but it's fair to say that the experiment failed. All but 3 carriages were scrapped. Then one of the 3 carriages they saved was scrapped. The story behind them seems simple enough on the face of it. The lines out of Charing Cross were crowded, Bulleid did his Bulleid thing, and it didn't work. But why then, for the first time, would they try to do this? There are some very significant clues in this document here, and if you're a regular viewer, you'll recognise it because I haven't been able to shut up about it recently. This is the London Plan Working Party report to the Minister of Transport. It was published in 1949, the very same year that the 4DDs went into service. And this report actually talks about them. Now, the problems with overcrowding on the lines out of South London were a well-known, long-standing problem. But there wasn't really much that could be done about it. The lines were electrified, which allowed for a fast and frequent service, and every slot in the timetables was filled. In 1943, a radical proposal was made in the County of London Plan, which was published in 1946. This would involve demolishing many of the old terminal stations that served the south of England, plus the lines that ran into them. Those lines and stations would be rebuilt underground. There would also be new lines running right through the city. There would be a new mega station near to where London Bridge was, which was where many of these lines would converge. It was a nice idea, but who was going to pay for it? No one, that's who. Britain had no money in the post-war era. What was more, the architects of the County of London Plan were working from estimates about post-war traffic. The Working Party had more concrete statistics. The massive rebuilding programme would do more harm than good. Not only would it be costly, but it would cause enormous disruption and only add to overcrowding. Instead, the solution the Working Party came up with was, to put it crudely, bigger trains. And here I'm going to quote from the report directly. In view of the importance of the relief of overcrowding on the southern region by lengthening trains or, as an alternative, by the use of double-decker trains, The Commission have asked the railway executive to press on with the construction of an experimental double-decker train set, so that a decision on this question can be reached at an early date. Later in the report, they say, "The first priority works of an urgent character are as follows. Lengthening Southern Railway suburban trains where necessary to 10 cars with consequential works or provision of double-decker trains. For the expenditure involved, these measures will give far greater traffic relief than any others. Congestion will be substantially eased where this is necessary in the southern half of London. The extent to which it is necessary, if at all, to lengthen the trains will depend upon the success of experiments with double-decker coaches." So there you have it. The double-decker trains were built by order of the government, or at least a subcommittee of the government. And it was no small matter. If they weren't successful, longer trains would be needed, and that would have to be factored into the building programme for new and rebuilt lines. Now, design work had already started. The report mentions that a mock-up had been made of the train, and this would be used both for early experiments and for demonstrations to the public at Marylebone Station. Still, it seems that the development may have been somewhat hurried. The Working Party reached their conclusions by October 1948, and the trains were in service in November 1949. The outcome of all this was the abandonment of the double-decker train concept, seemingly for good. Platform lengthening in order to take 10-coach trains has happened, but at a slow pace. Alternative solutions, such as the construction of new lines, new rolling stock and more modern signalling, have also gone a long way towards relieving overcrowding. But I think it's just something that has to be accepted. Trains out of London will always be packed. Well, I do hope you enjoyed today's video and it wasn't too esoteric for you. I didn't really intend to make a full video, but just the more I looked into this, the longer the script got. So it ended up being split off from the video it was originally going to be into its own thing. And I haven't made the original video yet. Sorry, I'm rambling again. As I say, I just thought it was an interesting discovery, and I've not seen it mentioned in any books or articles on the 4DDs. Anyway, I would like to thank my donors on Ko-fi and Patreon and here on YouTube for your support. You are the government mandate to my crazy idea. And I will see you all again very soon. Cheerio.